So please put your hands together for Martin Workman, Director, Water Ministry for the Environment. Hara mai, Madden. You direct that at the back of the apple.
Doesn't work, I think.
And push that.
Okay.
Yeah. Right hand, direct at it.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Tararua te manga, ko Ruamahanga te awa, ko Takitimu te waka, ko Ngāti Moi te hapu, ko Ngāti Kahungunu ki Wairarapa te iwi, ko Ngāti ko Papawai te marae, ko Martin Workman toku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It's great to be here, and very much thank you to the organisers for putting this great event on. It's a great program, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what comes out of this and the discussion and what common pathway forward that we can find for how we address fresh water. I was going to start off with my freshwater story, what water means to me. I actually grew up in far north in Kaitaia, and one of my favourite sort of childhood memories was mucking around at this place that's showing up on the picture here, Lake Ngātu, which is a dune lake just behind 90 Mile Beach. And we used to muck around with my family and friends on a little dinghy yacht thing, and we'd throw each other out of this yacht and have a great time capsizing it, swimming after it when it got away on us, and generally just mucking around in the water. And I would have swallowed so much of that beautiful clean water, never got sick, and we just took it for granted. Today, Lake Ngātu suffers algal blooms. The water quality's deteriorated, caused by residential subdivision and more intensive farming around that lake. And so that makes me pretty sad as to what I aspire to for my grandkids, for our mokopuna, is that they get to enjoy that mucking around in water that I had the privilege to do, and also that they have a place to live and a job. And so in my role as Director of Water, that's what gets me up every morning and trying to shape that future. I'm going to cover three key points in my talk. First point is that fresh water is a real priority for the Ministry for the Environment. Second, that there's a real need from the Ministry's point of view, as well as the policy work that's badly needed on water, that we have a real focus on tangible actions on the ground, actually getting stuff happening on the ground that results in the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And the third one is the way that we work as a ministry, and this includes Ministry for Primary Industries that I'm still employed by, that we actually work together on this. We need a Team New Zealand approach to fresh water. We need a common vision and joined up action, and we need ministries such as the environment to be playing a leadership role in doing that. My clicker's not working, so I have to wave. Yeah, thanks. Oh no, I've got another laptop that I'm using, so that one doesn't work on it.
Oh, okay.
So as everyone knows, clean water is a real hot topic, and it's especially so in the Hawke's Bay here. The number of media stories gone through the roof, over 1,000 items each month. Debate is raging on social media. People are looking for action, they're looking for leadership, they're looking for solutions to our water quality issues. The government went out with the Clean Water Package earlier in the year, and we got 10,000 submissions, unheard of number of submissions on those proposals. And a lot of those were critical of the swimming standards proposals included in that clean water document. But I guess, as I was saying, the focus of those proposals is to achieve real improvements in water quality on the ground. In the swimming standards, the goal there is to actually make an additional 10,000 kilometres of rivers and lakes swimmable in the future. It's also putting in place proposed regulations to exclude stock from an additional 56,000 kilometres of waterway. And so the intent is to clean up water and make that happen and to take actions to do that. We'll be providing more advice to ministers in the coming months, and there'll be final decisions before September. But there is a lot more to do beyond this package. So water allocation is one of the big remaining issues that we have. So this includes looking at the water bottling issue that is raging here in Hawke's Bay and other places, but it also is much broader. It is looking at how, as a country, do we allocate the rights to take water and also to discharge contaminants to water. So it's both the water quantity and water quality issues. How do we recognise existing right holders and still provide for new users, especially where some of our catchments are over-allocated? How do we make it easier for rights to be transferred between users? How much national direction is needed compared to local decision-making by councils and communities? These are some of the questions that a cross-government team of officials is working on with the help of a technical advisory group. Options are being developed to present to ministers by the end of the year, and the intention is to have a wide-ranging discussion with the public in 2018 on the proposals going forward. Another big area of policy still needing attention is three waters. So this is three waters being the drinking water supply, the stormwater management, and the wastewater management. The Havelock North drinking water inquiry is just one area that's highlighted the need for us to do a lot better in the provision of these services. The Ministry for the Environment are carrying out a review of the NES for sources of human drinking water. The focus of the NES is catchment and source protection as a first barrier to ensure the safe provision of drinking water. Regional councils are responsible to give effect to that NES. The Ministry is now out there following up with councils to confirm they are meeting their responsibilities under the National Environmental Standard. The Minister has also written to all regional councils to encourage them to work collaboratively with their territorial authorities and district health boards. And so it is really good to see all three of those organisations involved in the symposium today. Another big policy issue that we have been working on for quite some years, but there is a lot more that needs doing, is the runoff from farms. A lot has been done about point source discharges, but this diffuse discharges of sediment, nutrients, bacteria is a huge issue that, as a country, we need to be addressing. This photo is my uncle Neil, my cousin Simon, and their dog Murphy. They are sheep and beef farmers in South Otago, in hill country near the Catlins. I spent lots of holidays down on the farm as a kid, and remember my granddad burning the bush on the hills in the late 1970s with help from government subsidies. Huge fires that burnt for days. My nana loved the bush, and she wasn't too pleased. She pushed back on my granddad and had 130 hectares of the best bush saved by covenants. She also had a big impact on my Uncle Neil and his brothers. And since taking over the farm, he has been replanting the south-facing slopes, the gullies, and the poor soil areas, putting back the trees that had been removed. Now there is 150 hectares in forest, and the aim is to make the best use of the land, to farm it to its capability. Despite retiring land and reducing stock numbers, production and profit on the farm have actually improved. My cousin Simon is now taking over more of the running of the farm, and he has fenced and restored the native riparian vegetation along the local Glen Oamaru stream. They are also planting more slower growing and higher value trees and trying to find markets for them to reduce the number of Pinus radiata that they're planting. Neil is president of the Farm Forestry Association. He is a big advocate of using the land for what it is suited for, both economically and environmentally. And he's passionate about taking a longer term view to how we farm our land. He also sees the value of family farms, our hill country family farms in particular, going forward for our rural communities. The human aspect, that community aspect, is so vital in our farming communities, and how are we going to provide for their livelihoods going forward. So in his role as president of Farm Forestry, Neil's advocating for changes to government policy, which is going on. And that involves looking at a review of the ETS and what incentives that provides for farmers to do the right thing, such as he's begun to do on his property. So there's a lot of work on policy going on and planning documents around the country. But increasingly, MFE are also wanting to focus on how do we support councils and communities to take action, to get real tangible results, and to actually carry out the implementation of the existing water policy framework we've already got. We can keep on generating more strategies, more plans, more policies, but if we don't implement them effectively, nothing will change. So we are setting out in a new way of working. And so this photo shows my chief executive at MFE, Vicky Robertson, out with a bunch of farmers. These farmers are involved in a group called Te Hono, and working with these farmers is an example of our new way of working. Te Hono is a group of people pursuing a major shift in the way the primary industry operates. MFE are helping out, bringing the big picture connections across government and specialist advice. The group includes chief executives of major New Zealand corporations, Fonterra, Landcorp, and others. They have all got skin in the game, and they've started working together on finding solutions to water that they see as being the biggest issue that New Zealand faces. One project under Te Hono is Waka Aotearoa. Some of the largest farms in New Zealand, totaling 350 farms, such as Landcorp, and many Māori land trusts are involved. And their aim is to be farming at a gold standard for water management, to be the best in the world. They are developing the standard now and changing their practices and working with MFE to do that. As well as achieving environmental outcomes, also being a big driver for them is their business plan and their vision for adding value to their products. MFE sees real value in working with these farmers to actually get the results happening on the ground faster and more efficiently as we work through the big policy and planning issues. We need action urgently. So another way that we're doing this is engaging with farmers up and down the country, not just those that are highly engaged. And so this is involving work with the regional councils, Dairy NZ, Beef and Lamb, Horticulture New Zealand, Irrigation New Zealand, to increase the uptake of good farming practices across all of New Zealand. It builds on work that's been done in Canterbury, where good management practices have been identified. And now we're working with these groups to take it across the country and to adapt it for each of the regions, such as Hawke's Bay. The project partners are driven by a desire to accelerate the uptake of good practice. They acknowledge that good practices won't be all that's required, and there's already been the pointing out of some of the system changes that are required as well. But this baseline is an urgently needed step in the right direction. The other thing that the ministry is doing is investing increasingly in water data and more research. Better science and information is going to be vital to solve the difficult issues that we have. But it's not just that use of new or investment in new research that is critical. It is also making better use of what we already know, as Louis was alluding to in the earlier presentation. We know so much already, and we need to do better of making that knowledge available and relevant to people such as farmers. As existing research shows how 50% of the contaminant load from farms can be mitigated by targeting critical source areas and having a less than 10% impact on profit. And Alison Jews, who's here, has done a lot of work in this area with farmers. The knowledge exists. We just need to be changing the incentives and doing better at sharing the information to support our farmers to make the changes that are required. So just wrapping up, the ministry, as well as developing and doing the policy work that's needed, is passionate about supporting the action that many people are already taking on the ground, but we need to scale it up. And out of symposiums such as this, having the discussions across the various interested parties, members of the public, as to how they can be involved and how we can support them to face up to the challenges that I've outlined today. I'll be interested in hearing how we can continue and do better in supporting you. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Any questions that you may have, please put them on hold because we're going to have Liz now, and then then you got two people to aim at afterwards. Martin, you've heard how strategic he is in the government size, the MPI, and with the Ministry for the Environment, how key he is in policy and legislation as well. But he's just gone up a few more steps in my estimation. He's also Ngāti Kahungunu, he's my cousin, so that takes him up another couple of notches. Right, Liz Lambert's our next speaker. Liz Lambert, I don't know if she needs much introduction to you, but I've known Liz for the last 20 years. She's been with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. She's seen out 4 CEOs, and whenever the men stuff up, she steps up to the plate, fixes it up, and then steps back. She's been a strong and steady pair of hands, and I'd like you to put your hands together for Liz Lambert. Homai te paki paki.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Nahiwi. Gosh, that almost made me blush. I can't believe it's 4 CEOs. certainly for you, Chair, I know that. Look, thanks very much for the opportunity to speak, and obviously as one of the co-sponsors of the symposium, we welcome the opportunity to address you. When I say we, I'm, if you like, the advance party from the Regional Council. Over the course of the next 2 days, you'll hear from 4 of us. So this afternoon, there'll be some perhaps more technical, well, won't be perhaps, it will be more scientific information around the state of our knowledge of our water resources on the Heretaunga Plains. And part of that one part of that comes from Dr. Jeff Smith, who's our principal hydrologist, so he will be talking about the aquifer. And another topic will be coming from Dr. Andy Hicks, who will be talking about surface water. And then tomorrow you'll hear twice from James Palmer, who's our incoming Chief Executive. Is that number 5 then? And he will be talking first of all in the morning about the Havelock North drinking water inquiry findings, and then later on the day he's really going to be explaining to you, I guess, the way forward and talking about the tank plan change, which is an acronym which we love having in local government, and that's the Turakuria, Hariri, Nauroro and Karamu catchments. And it's a plan change that the Regional Council has been working on for a number of years in conjunction with an extensive stakeholder group, and really we'll be looking at, I think, a lot of the issues that will be discussed, have already been discussed and will be discussed today and tomorrow, will feed into that. Now I've got to see if I can get this to work. Yes, right. So the first part of my talk is going to be a little bit non-Heretaunga Plains focused. I want to just really give you, first of all, an understanding, if you don't already have it, of the freshwater resources in the whole of Hawke's Bay, for which we have some responsibility. And then the next part following on from that, I'll be talking unfortunately but necessarily about some of the legislation that we operate under. I won't labour that too long because, as someone else said this morning, the law doesn't come with pictures, but I think it is important for everyone that wants to go away with an understanding of what our options are and what possibilities we have for future water management, that you understand the current legislative framework within which we operate. So there's a map of Hawke's Bay region, and that's showing the 24 river catchments that are within our region. We have 7 major rivers, and I've listed them there, 3 major lakes, 2 aquifers, the Heretaunga Plains and the Ruataniwha Plains. We have 13 major flood control and drainage schemes, and we manage 239 kilometres of stop banks to protect urban areas and rural land from river overflows. As a regional council, we manage, and this was current as of Monday, 2,261 resource consents to take and use ground and surface water. We look after 246 data collection sites right across the region. And from those sites, we take and analyse over 3,000 samples every year. Oh, that is, sorry, apologies for that being rather small. Well, it looks, yeah, oh, not so bad there. Look, like I said, I wanted to just really give you some context around the responsibilities that we have. And there's 2 areas I'm going to focus on. One is the Local Government Act, and the second is the Resource Management Act. So the Local Government Act really tells us what we can do in terms of managing resources, and the Resource Management Act really tells us how we do it. So this is just the only slide on the Local Government Act, but it really just highlights, and I've highlighted in red in relation to the topic of this symposium, what our responsibilities are in terms of managing the effects of fresh water, land, air and coastal waters. And we do that through developing regional policy statements and plans, and we also do that flowing on from those plans through managing resource consents. We also manage rivers. So not only do we have a problem of too little water at times, obviously we sometimes have a problem of too much water. And so we look after the management of our rivers, we look after soil erosion and flood control. The district and city council, so the territorial authorities, also have their responsibilities defined under the Local Government Act. And the relevant provisions there, again, are highlighted in red. The provision of local infrastructure, including water, sewage and stormwater, which, as Martin called them, the three waters, and roads, and controlling the effects of land use. So getting on to the how, the Resource Management Act. We look after discharges of contaminants into water, onto land and into the air. And we also manage water takes and water uses, both surface water and groundwater. Part of our regulatory responsibility too is around the damming and diversion of water. And we can also develop rules for land use for soil conservation and water quality and quantity purposes. This map here just really gives you a, I think probably really well sums up the hierarchy of planning tools that we have under the RMA. So the very top line there is the documents, the tools, the instruments that central government uses. So Martin and the team at the Ministry for the Environment, they have the ability to develop national policy statements, which really, including the one that we, most recent one is around freshwater management. They have the ability to develop national environment standards, which actually have the effects of rules that we have to give effect to. And alongside that, the Minister of Conservation has responsibility for the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement. If you come down a tier, the Regional Council, we have, again, we are required to have a regional policy statement. We're required to have a regional coastal plan, and we can also optionally have regional plans for some of the other resources. Here in Hawke's Bay, we have combined all our regional policy statement and regional plans, with the exception of the coast, into one document. The Regional Resource Management Plan, and a number of you have probably had close encounters with it over the past few years. And then the city and district councils are required to prepare district plans. And both regional councils and city and district councils can issue resource consents and can also prescribe or describe permitted activities that are allowed. So our ability to influence the outcome and activities, particularly as it relates to this kaupapa around freshwater management, can be summed up in two processes. We have the planning side of it, which I've just described, the hierarchy there, and we also have a more regulatory response through resource consents. But the planning side of it is really brings together a number of different aspects. We have community involvement, and so you'll get a greater feel for that tomorrow when you hear about the tank process. We obviously have to have some science so that we understand exactly what it is that we're dealing with around natural resources. And we need consistency with the national planning framework, so the National Policy Statement and National Environment Standards. So before I move on to talking about the Hiratonga Plains, I thought it was important that you also get a feel for some of the parties that actually help us in our planning area. And I really wanted to just make reference to the Crown Research Institutes. Now, a couple of the speakers from ESR and NIWA are going to be talking this afternoon, and they'll be speaking alongside my colleagues from the Regional Council about groundwater and about surface water. And they are really an integral part of helping us understand what we're trying to manage. And I just thought, well, I'll put a little bit of it, not so much a plug, but I think it's important, again, in terms of context, that you understand the role that they have and how they support the regional sector in helping our understanding. So there's 7 Crown Crown established research institutes, and each of them has a speciality in either a productive sector, such as agriculture and pastoral, or the forestry, or a natural resource. And so they're all charged by the Crown with making a difference. That's really the key. They've got to make a difference to our understanding of the resources that we have. And as I've said, the regional sector, we work very closely with them. All my colleagues throughout New Zealand do as well. We rely on their expertise, we rely on their specialism, because we can't all employ, there's not enough groundwater modellers, for example, to go around. So it is important. They do play an important role, and we certainly benefit from them. And then just the other issue, I guess, that I just really wanted to bring to your attention. Over the past couple of years, in conjunction with the Ministry for the Environment and Massey University, the regional sector has developed a website called LAWA, which stands for Land, Air, Water, Aotearoa. So it's lawa.org.nz. And that brings together the data that's held by all 16 regional councils into one website. So previously, if you wanted to compare surface water quality here with there, you'd have to go to the respective websites of that particular regional council. We actually have it all available now under one site. The data is held by each regional council, so you're actually just diving into their particular website, but it's a much more user-friendly place to find out information. So there's data from over 3,000 sites recorded on LAWA. So let's get on and talk about the Heretaunga Plains. We have about 20 billion, just under, cubic metres of rainfall in Hawke's Bay every year, and over half of that goes straight out to sea, and that's not a problem at all. That's just a fact. That's how it is. And the rest of it moves through the Hawke's Bay aquifers. One of those aquifers is the Heretaunga Aquifer. There's about 3.4 billion cubic metres of water a year. And that little green raindrop in the bottom left there represents the amount or the percentage of water that we allocate through resource consents, around about 5%. Now, I don't want you looking at this and thinking, great, there's a whole lot of water that we can access. A lot of that is actually deep groundwater, and it's not accessible, and my colleague Jeff Smith would explain why that's potentially a little bit misleading, but nevertheless, in terms of sheer volume of the groundwater, that's what we're looking at. And then down below that, of that 5% of consented water use, this very small blue slither that's circled, that represents a 2.5% of that 5% that's consented for water bottling. So what do we consent for? Here's a breakdown of the water use that's been consented. Just over half, a fraction over half, is consented for irrigation. Around about a quarter, just under, is consented for residential use. 22% for use by industry. 2.5% for water bottling, and 1.6% for that ubiquitous other, which is mainly, in this case, frost protection. So how do people apply for resource consents, or what is the process actually about? So I've already outlined, albeit quite briefly, the planning process that we go through. So our plans that we develop end up with rules that either allow particular activities to happen, or they require you to get a consent and you have to meet certain conditions. And so they really set the framework for what any activity is required to do to get a resource consent. Our rules are based on community input, they're based on our scientific knowledge, and we try and work towards identifying what is a sustainable allocation of that particular resource, whether it be a river, a stream, an aquifer. When a consent is received in the Regional Council, we look at what the effect of that is going to be on the environment and on all other relevant users as well. If necessary, That consent will be publicly notified and submissions invited, and a hearing may be held. At the end of the whole process, a decision is made and a consent is either issued or it's not. But if it's issued, it's usually for around about 10 to 20 years, sometimes up to a maximum of 35 years. This is a map which broadly shows the Hiratonga Plains aquifer. The light blue is the confined part of the aquifer, and the darker blue is the unconfined. Now, Jeff will explain this in more detail this afternoon, and believe me, it's not a clear-cut line like we're showing on that map there. There is a transition, there is a semi-confined layer between the unconfined and the confined. But broadly speaking, the confined is protected by a layer of clay, and the unconfined is quite shallow, and contaminants may permeate into that. But it's important, I think, that you at least have that visual memory there when I talk about some of the questions that we get asked and some of the, if you like, myths or misunderstandings, perhaps is a better word, around how we make resource consent decisions. So here's one that we get, well, actually quite often now. How can we allow water bottling consents when irrigators have to turn off their supplies in the summer, or when I can't water my garden because there's a ban on? So if I go back to that map there, all the water bottling consents that have been issued are in the confined area. And the important thing to note about that is that the confined aquifer does not have an impact on river flows. So taking from the confined aquifer does not directly affect nearby river flows or levels, whereas taking from an unconfined or semi-confined may do. And that's why consent holders in those particular areas may be required to go on to ban during a dry summer period. The District Council is a consent holder. They hold a consent to take water from the Regional Council. They hold numerous consents because they have them in different locations. So they are treated like any other consent holder, and they have conditions on their consents. But the reason that they may require you to stop watering your garden is potentially because demand may be so high that either their network, their distribution network, may not be able to keep up. But it's not directly linked to any of the other water consent takes. Another one we get quite often, it seems anyone can get a consent for as much water as they like. Actually, that's not true. A resource consent to take water is assessed against the rules in our regional plan, and we normally have some allocation limits on it. But we also make sure that it's actually only actual and reasonable need that is applied for, and we have a whole range of information that helps us quantify and define what that might be. We need to be satisfied that people are using the water efficiently, and we need to be absolutely satisfied that they're not affecting neighbouring bores, nearby rivers, lakes or wetlands. Can we charge royalties on water use? So I think this has already been referred to already this morning, and the answer is no, we can't, and Lawrence has already sort of expressed that. By law, we can only charge for the costs of managing the resource, such as our scientific investigations or managing the resource, the administration of the resource consent. So around a third of those costs, that's currently $1.7 million, are met by the water user, and the rest is met by ratepayers. Royalties will only be possible with changes to the law, and to date, central government has resisted such changes, saying no one owns the water. I just really want to finish. I've got a couple of slides here, but I think because of the purpose of this symposium, which is really to look at a way forward, and I'm really hoping that we can have a really good dialogue about that around the course of the next 2 days. But I think it's important that we just really touch on some of the challenges that we're going to have. And the next couple of slides really talk about those. The key determinants of water quality are landowners and land uses, both rural and urban, and city and district councils in terms of the infrastructure, but especially stormwater into waterways. But different waterways have different challenges, and they will all have different solutions. So one of the first challenges is there is no one-size-fits-all solution, and so looking at a particular set of regulations will not work across every waterway. But some waterways, their issue will be around E. coli, some will be more around nutrients, some sediments. Sedimentation is probably the number one issue for us in Hawke's Bay in terms of surface water quality. Heavy metals, as Louis referred to, is an issue in the Ahuriri estuary and in some of the other waterways in Hawke's Bay, but they all have different solutions that are required. The Ministry of the Environment recently released their National Environment Report on water quality, and they found the following average E. coli levels. So CFU stands for colony forming unit, and that's per millilitre. Urban land use 400, pastoral 180, well you can read those, forestry 50 and native forest 20. But the key point about that is that there is a significant issue for urban areas, and there will be, and people who think that it's just a rural problem will have to accept that actually we're all in it. And while the average length of urban waterways is clearly a lot less than in the rural, it's clear that both types of both urban and pastoral land uses need to bear the costs of improvement. What will that mean? Well, actually, I think that that'll mean quite a seismic shift in the way that we regulate the way people use their land. So on the one hand, you get people saying, well, we just need to impose a stocking limit on a farm. Actually, it's going to be a lot more complicated and a lot affect probably a lot of our assumptions far greater than that. And by that I mean we're going to have to look really closely at things like, in the future, like urban expansion, like land uses over unconfined aquifers, like the level of investment that's going to be required in urban infrastructure. Those are really going to be quite significant focuses in terms of managing water in the future, and the costs will be significant. So, last slide. What can we do? Well, there's probably a whole range of things that we can do, but I think we agree that collectively we're willing to do what's necessary to lift our game. Regional Council included, everyone else included as well. We have to agree on our desired outcomes. Now, whether or not that's through statements in our regional policy statement or a more broad generic kind of agreement about what we want. We've talked already this morning about a number one priority being safe drinking water. What else is it that we want as our key outcomes? I think we need to focus on trends and not get fixated on numbers. My experience over a number of years now with the Regional Council is that we can argue all the way to the Environment Court about a particular number, and sometimes nobody's happy with the outcome. But really where we want to focus is around the trends. Are we improving or are we getting worse? That's really what we should be focusing on. We need collectively to set priorities, and more importantly, we need to acknowledge that we can't do it all at once. And we can't probably even do it all very fast at all. Because one of the things about water, as you'll appreciate, is it's taken 150 years to get to this state, and we're not going to fix it in 3. So it is important that we are going to set priorities. It's also important that we retain both regulatory and non-regulatory tools. And I say that because there would be a number of people that think you just regulate your problems away, prohibit everything, or at least some of the things, or at least make it very difficult. But regulation can take between 7 and 10 years to get right through the RMA process, from the time you start right out to the time the Environment Court's finished with it. In those 7 to 10 years, if you're spending money in non-regulatory, such as environmental education, such as plantings, changing behaviours, you can achieve so much by the time those rules finally take effect. And that's why I think it's really important that you actually have a good mix of both. And finally, financial planning, because I can't emphasise enough, the costs are going to be significant long term, and we need to think about that as part of our priority setting. And that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz. There's no substitute for experience and feeling the pulse of your mahi. So well done. Well, I'm going to open to the floor now. Now, our audience, you people have been exquisitely polite this morning. When we talk about water, people tend to get quite emotional and quite boisterous. But I just want to say you've been very polite. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty now. We've sort of telescoped from the sort of stratosphere, the cultural elements, and we're getting down to the nitty-gritty, the technical, and this afternoon we get down more forensic. So questions to both Martin and Liz. Open it up to the floor now. And again, questions, not statements, questions. Over to you. Front row. Identify yourself and we'll bring you the mic. So 2 in the front row. Oh, you first.
Yes, thank you. Yes, a question to Martin Workman, that I think we all appreciate the good work that the Ministry of the Environment is trying to implement, and also that many landowners these days have shaken off the settler attitude towards forest and land use. But bearing that in mind, and the need, as he states, of getting new policies implemented, the problem there, it seems, is actually central government politicians. Have you any ideas on how to get them away from perpetual growth, economic development, and seeing the human place in the living environment? Thank you.
So I'm not a politician, government official, so limits to what I can say. But I guess I spend, for instance, a fair bit of time with Minister Nick Smith, and I've been on the road with him and to public meetings, and I guess the thing that I would say is that he's really passionate about improving the environment, improving water quality. He actually really, I've seen him get really emotional talking about his family being able to go swimming in their local rivers and how much he wants that to be part of our heritage going forward, and talking to people overseas and how they've lost it. And I think Louis touched on that, as to we don't want to go the same way as what's occurred in so many other countries around the world. So your point being that our politicians don't care, I don't think that's right. I think they do care, and I think they're increasingly hearing the message that's coming from the public that we need to get that environment economy balance right, and there is an increasing movement to address that. Maybe not as quickly as you want to see it, but I'm seeing change occur.
Thank you, Martin. Front row here. Microphone, please. Two from the front row.
Ian McIntosh. A question follows on from the last one and some of the earlier work, but in view of what the inquiry said in Havelock North, the fact that Napier City Council's just released some raw sewage, my question is the job of environmental monitoring just too big? and either one of you could think about that or choose to answer it. But it does seem to me that you're not keeping on top of it.
Thanks, Ian. Good question. I've actually just taken over the compliance section of council today, and so timely. Look, I think what I would say is that there is increasing expectations around compliance. I think we've probably used or relied on rules to we've relied on regulation to make people behave in a certain way, and we've just assumed that they're going to do that. And I think that certainly there's an increasing community expectation, and rightly so, that we need to not only put those in place, but be seen to be ensuring that they are followed. So I don't know that it's too big a job. I think that there are, in some cases, extenuating circumstances. I'm not saying that either the examples you quoted fit into that category, but I think that we are increasingly having to put a focus on to compliance monitoring. We may, I think, be under-resourced for that at the moment, and that's something that the council needs to address. Certainly, my council has indicated that it's a strong priority for them, and we'll be expecting that they'll resource us accordingly. So to give people, the public, confidence and certainty in that people are meeting the conditions that are required of them.
Liz, stay there, please.
Patrick.
Patrick Bingaman. Liz, you pointed out that 21% of the water take was industrial. I was involved with Wakatu, and we were putting 2 petrol tankers full into the sewer line every minute. And that translates to about 25,000 litres. With Wakatu and Tamoana closed, and I know we've got Progressive, what was the industrial take when both of those plants were going?
Oh, I'm sorry, Patrick, I actually don't have that information to hand, but we can find that out for you and let you know.
In the middle there, and then behind. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, yeah. I would just like to ask about compliance. Why does the council, in the public reserve that runs from Riverland Road down to the mouth, run stock, dump industrial rubbish, and run stock, dump rubbish, and do huge amounts of extraction out of there? They're not complying with their own rules. Surely stock on the riverbed is not right. Surely watering holes that go down 20 or 30 feet on the riverbed down to water the stock is not right. And I've got photos of this to prove it. There's no two ways about it. It's happening. How's that complying with anything?
Sure. So the council's got a policy of removing stock from waterways.
Still there.
Yeah, let me explain. One of the things that we have is we have a series of leases with neighbouring farmers, because we don't own the stock, but they provide, if you like, an important service to us in keeping the grass down. But the council has accepted that that's no longer publicly acceptable, and we are increasing the maintenance that we do from our works group for that. But the issue with why there are still some there is because those leases have yet to expire. Once they are, those cars are out of there. And we do require fencing anyway, but obviously occasionally gates get left open or fences get vandalised, and in some cases there aren't fences, I accept that. It is actually, Edward, really just a timing issue, and it's certainly a priority for the council to ensure that stock is out of waterway. In terms of the dumping, I mean, I'd be really surprised if we were the ones that were dumping anything down there. Seriously, we spend most of our works groups spend most of their Mondays clearing rubbish out of from alongside rivers and waterways. So I'd like to take that conversation offline. If you've got some specific examples, we can follow up on it.
Thank you. At the back. the lady at the back, and then in front here, and then over on the side. In the white jacket, cream jacket.
Hi, thank you. This question is for Liz. I just wanted to commend you saying that it shouldn't be about urban versus rural. And the numbers that you showed with 400 CFUs per 100 millilitres in urban areas. But those numbers are a little bit misleading in the sense that you've got a national average for pastoral versus a national average for urban. So I think that that also solidifies the argument that it is urban versus rural and trying to take the heat off of the rural. So I just caution about those numbers. But my question is specifically about the groundwater usage by percentage that you showed on that slide. Is it possible to see that slide again?
Should be. That one?
Might have been one before that.
That one?
Yes, I guess it would be those two slides. So you mentioned the difference between confined versus unconfined.
Yep.
And the importance about confined having a relationship with surface water and that natural recharge being there on a daily effect. But the caution that I have, and the question actually specifically, is about the unconfined water usage. And when you look at snapshots like this as a percentage of the total, are you taking into account the time element in which it would take to recharge an unconfined aquifer? Because that's not a constantly recharging at the time rate in which we would be taking that water from?
You're probably actually better to ask Jess Smith that question this afternoon. In terms of the breakdown of the allocation of resource consents, what I was referring to there is just a snapshot in time. It's our current water take consents, and really it's just showing how they are allocated between various activities. And I wasn't, just going back to your first point, I wasn't trying to play urban versus rural. What I'm trying to say it's and. It's and, urban and rural.
Thank you.
Thank you. The lady second from the aisle there. And then gentleman second from the aisle over here. And then at the back.
Thank you, Martin and Liz, for your informative talks. And my name is Sarah Triad, and I would like to ask Liz a question. It's about the roles of regional council and district councils. And you had up on your slide the regional council's role is managing the effects of using fresh water, and district council is the provision of local infrastructure, which includes water-orientated infrastructure. Now, I'm just wondering, with that at the moment we've got a proposal for a dam, and in the future we'll probably have more proposals for dams and for different uses. At the moment it's for irrigation. So I'm just wondering whether, given that this has been such a controversial process to get the RWSS under the way, wondering whether really it should have been a district council role, more to be the developer, and for the Hawke's Bay Regional Council to remain out of it and then be the regulator. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Look, I know you're very passionate about the RWSS. I don't think it was something that Peter Butler ever thought about, so I'm not sure that I can answer that in any other way, other than to say that the RWSS wasn't just a scheme that was dreamed up to cause controversy. It was part of a response to Council's management of the Tukituk catchment, where we recognised that we were going to need to significantly increase water flows in the rivers in order to be able to maintain and improve aquatic habitat. But one of the consequences of that was going to be significantly increased uncertainty and less security of supply for people that relied on water down there. So the idea of water storage, as opposed to one very large dam, but the idea of water storage was actually part of a package of a response to the issue of improving water quality in the Tukitook River. Now, where it has ended up with one large dam is not where it started out. It was going to be a series of smaller water storage schemes, much smaller, and for various reasons through the pre-feasibility and feasibility stages, it's ended up with a proposal that we have now. So I think it was part of a response from Regional Council to recognising the economic impacts of its environmental decisions.
Thank you, Liz. Gentleman on second. And then going to the back and then coming to the front.
Thank you very much. I'm Barry Jones. I'm a duck shooter and fly fisherman, and that's where I'm coming from at the moment. In that I've recently come back from a trip to the South Island to find that the Ministry of the Environment have reduced the hours that they are checking on people coming from the South Island to the North Island with Didimo. And I'm just highlighting the fact that I was able to come on board into Island Ferry without being checked. And I find this very disturbing. I have been in touch with your people in Wellington, and they tell me it's a cost-cutting situation where they're, instead of 8 o'clock till 5 o'clock check, they are on winter time from 10 o'clock in the morning till 5. And this is absolutely ridiculous. I am following it up, but seeing you here, I'd like to hear why you've cut the hours down.
You want me to answer why?
Yes,
Yep.
why you've cut the hours down
Sure.
in inspection of Didimo coming to... We haven't got Didimo into our
Yep.
waterways here. It's a very invasive weed, and if we don't watch it, we're going to have it.
Yep. So I don't have the specific answer, but I can imagine Ministry for Primary Industries and I think the Department of Conservation are involved as well. And it's that constant, there is so much to do in prioritising. Myrtle rust is just another example that's popped up recently as to where the resources go. So I imagine that cut has been a result of looking at where the priorities are and weighing up the risks. But I can find out more for you. There's some of my colleagues from MPI here that could follow up as well if you want to catch us at lunch, and we'll find out some more and get some details back to you.
Thank you very much.
So lady second from the back, and then we come to the front row over here.
Thank you. Alison Hughes, I'm a veterinarian and ecologist, and thank you Martin and Liz for those presentations. I've just got a question for both of you. Liz, you put up there that the national environmental standards sit above the regional plan in the authority. And Martin, you mentioned about a large proportion of catchment loads coming from critical source areas, of which can be reduced and also improve profit for farmers. I have a question for both of you that given the implications on drinking water and the implications also of intensive winter cropping and feedlotting situations, many of which are permitted activities, do you see those activities as potential critical source areas in a catchment? And if so, if there's a potential profit from reducing those activities, is that being well weighed up in terms of environmental and social costs and farming profitability? So sorry, two questions there, but do you see that intensive winter cropping and feedlotting as a critical source area for a catchment?
I think it's very difficult to actually generalise an answer to that, because every catchment and every sub-catchment is different. What I would acknowledge is that certainly in terms of the national environmental standards for drinking water, we probably dropped the ball a bit around looking at, in the case of Havelock North, around what are the critical activities within a small area. Having said that, there aren't feedlots in that area at all. So, but I think that's a good point, well made, Alison, about us, having to have probably a better focus on some of those national environmental standards. In terms of the feedlots themselves, they are required to be consented. We do have quite a focus this year around our compliance people going and meeting with, they have met with them already and made them very aware of what the resource management requirements are for them to have to meet. And certainly in terms of water quality within a catchment, that's probably the critical driver there.
Okay, Madden.
So it will get picked up in that review of the NES drinking water standard. And a related factor is the Ministry is working with regional councils at looking at the whole compliance monitoring regime and how we improve that. And I think that sort of goes to some of what you're saying as well, Alison.
Front row over here, and then second row in the middle. Front row on the right, then second row in the middle. I think there might be our last 3 questions before lunch, but as been said earlier, if you've got some questions that you want to ask, then you can approach the speakers over lunch.
Kia ora, ngai o tiuka for Ngāti Kahungunu. I take care of the Taiao space, and my question's for Martin. The Ministry provides advice for local councils and guidelines in the management of our resources, and one of the mechanisms is the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water, and that's a great start. It's good to focus on limits and targets within it, but my question relates to some of the advice around averaging, and within the National Policy Statement it talks about overall, and that's not in the RMA, and that has been interpreted by the Ministry through policy that provided to councils with the phrase overs and unders, and that's averaging, and that was discussed earlier. And the problem with the overs and unders is how to measure it, or it creates a scenario where part of this water body you can allow it to degrade, and other parts you can allow the quality to lift up. It's an averaging. So there's been some critics of that, and Ngāti Kahungunu is one of them, the Parliamentary Commissioner is the other, and the problem is councils can interpret that to have that averaging approach and let water quality degrade. And we're really big on maintaining the water quality, and that's the whole point of, I guess, why we're here. And again, the whole point why we're here is the aquifer and maintaining that water body. So we had to take the regional council to court, who used part of their argument was advice from the Ministry. So my question is, will you stop promoting overs and unders and averaging approach, or have you stopped, and will you stop in the future? Because the rhetoric or the response from ourselves and from the court was that that's no longer practicable, and it's against the RMA.
So that court case that you took has had a lot of influence, and the Ministry has re-looked at it, and the latest proposals, and that clean water proposal has put forward changes to that maintain or improve provision. And so we aren't, as a Ministry, promoting the overs or unders, and in many ways the scientific feedback we've had is the real difficulty of actually being able to monitor that or to measure it. And if you've got different contaminants over or under in different catchments, and being able to do that comparison is very difficult. So the changes that have been being proposed in that clean water package is, instead of having that maintain or improve over a whole region, it's narrowed it down to the freshwater management unit that councils are charged with managing to. And in most cases, those are individual catchments or parts of catchments. So it's saying you have to maintain or improve within that, and it's also made a change in giving some more clarity that within the bands of the attributes that are in the national policy statement, that you have to keep within those bands. And that was all based on work that the Land and Water Forum have done over recent years. So those changes are coming in. So I think in practice, we have addressed some of the concerns that you've got, but interested as to whether we've gone as far as you see as being required.
Second row in the front here, and I think that'll be our last questions before lunch. 1, 2, or either.
Hi, my name's Zara and I'm from Taikuta Rudolph Steiner School, and I just wanted to talk about how you stated, Liz, that only 2.5% of our water gets bottled, when the stats weren't mentioned that approximately $50,000 not long ago were spent by the Hastings District Council for voting in favour to support water bottling plants. So my question is, how come the District Council is spending approximately $50,000 on supporting water bottling plants when that $50,000 could have gone into rainwater harvesting or making borehead space for sorting out our water because the cow manure goes into it?
Thanks, Sarah. I'm sorry to have to answer like this, but I can't answer on behalf of Hastings District Council. I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, Lawrence will.
It's a good question, and I can answer it. The $50,000 is up to $50,000. It's actually nothing to do with the water bottling plant. It's to do with the number of jobs that that plant would have generated. So we had a package of creating 1,000 new jobs in 5 years, and as part of that we've incentivised certain businesses. So KiwiBank, Rocket Apple, New Zealand Frost Fans, if they can grow a number of jobs in a certain period of time, they get so much. I think up until now, Miracle Water has received about 9,000 of that 50,000, and it won't get any more unless it was expected to generate up to 180 jobs. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Was there a question next door? If not, thank you very much for this first session. Please give all our speakers and presenters a good hand. And again, you've been a very polite audience. I think Lawrence is going to facilitate this afternoon's session, so I'll give you permission to go feral. So, without further ado, whakapainga nei kai, hauranga mātou tinana, whakangā tātou waira ki tari o te ora, amen. The food has been blessed. We'll see you back here at 1:10 past 1. Thank you.